to the Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hi, I'm Dana Torse, and welcome to another episode of the Truth in My Days radio program. Today, I'm here with John Torse and Jason Chan as they discuss the important topic of creation and evolution. We are continuing from the previous episode. We hope you enjoy.
Here's another fun thing, the moon rocks. The Apollo 11 brought back moon rocks, which were dated radiometrically 116 times, using a variety of methods, including rubidium, strontium, isochron dating, and other methods. 116 times using other methods to see how well it matches up to rubidium and strontium. Out of remember, the moon is supposed to be about as old as the Earth, so 4.3 to 4.56 billion years old. That's how old it is. The evolutionists tell us, the old Earth creationists tell us, and that's what the radiometric dating will tell you. Out of the 116 dates that they came up with by radiometric dating, only 10 of them fell in that range. 106 out of the 116 didn't match what the evolutionists tell us. They ranged anywhere from 40 million up to 8.2 billion years. Okay. So that's kind of a huge range of error, isn't it? Now, of course, the ones that didn't fit, they just sat around trying to make up excuses to explain away why it didn't fit. Now, this was published, again, in the journal Science, one of the top 2 scientific journals in the world, on January 30th, 1970, in the Moon issue dedicated to the proceedings of the Apollo 11 Lunar Science Conference. And then it's quite funny. Instead of accepting the dates, and that these dates don't work, because they've decided what the date is, they try to come up with explanations why these don't match. Potassium-argon dating. Oh, it's too old. Well, it must have lost some of that argon in some other way. The uncorrected potassium-argon dates were so young that they assumed almost half, 48% of the argon was lost by a speculative impact event. Isn't that convenient? Okay, when the actual data doesn't show what you want it to show, you just the data. Any evidence that was lost? No. The only evidence is, hey, it doesn't give us the number we want. At the same time, elsewhere, where it's giving you 2 different dates than you want, they have to speculate that there was excess argon in one of the moon rocks. So much that they couldn't even calculate the date. So isn't that convenient? When it doesn't match, either it's too little or too much. Well, we don't know where the too much came from, but it was there. The too little. Well, it lost some due to impact. Like, do you begin to smell a rat here? Because I do. I'm going to give you a couple of interesting quotes here. One's from Derek Ager, who is a doctrinaire evolutionist. He is actually past president of the British Paleontological Society. Okay. Highly respected scientist. And this quote, again, not from a creationist journal or a Christian source. It's a New Scientist, very popular, highly respected secular science magazine. And this guy should know, if anybody knows. And here's his quote. No paleontologist worthy of the name would ever date his fossils by the rocks in which they are found. I can think of no cases of radioactive decay being used to date fossils. Isn't that fascinating? The general public thinks, yeah, that's how they do it. That's how we know. I thought, yeah. But again, the trade secret inside is they don't do that. They know that it doesn't work. There's some more interesting quotes. This is from World Book Encyclopedia, Volume 7, page 364. Scientists determine when fossils were formed by finding the age of the rocks in which they lie. Okay, which makes sense, but then the question is, how do they find the age? Ager told us they don't use radiometric dating. Right. So how do they find the age of the rocks? Well, we read this, quote, the age of the rocks may be determined by the fossils found in them. Okay. And what's the source for that? World Book Encyclopedia, but now it's on to volume 15. So perhaps they're hoping that by the time you went through the 8 intervening volumes, you forgot. Scientists determine when fossils were formed by finding the age of the rocks in which they lie. The age of the rocks may be determined by the fossils found in them. Okay. Can you say colossal circular argument here?
Definitely.
Yeah. The only part here I can see that's true is where it says in which they lie. But they mean something very different there. Okay? So the general public is led to believe that they have these objective methods for determining the age of the earth. They really don't. It's a scam. We're back to what Professor Edward Larson said. If a people are intent in pushing out God or rejecting divine causation, this is their only alternative, is evolution, and for that they need the long ages. Let me give you another example of how these things work. And this comes from GeoTimes. And this was back in 1978. Big conference on there. And we read here, John Eadie was the world's leading solar astronomer at the time. John Eadie, opening the morning session, dropped a bombshell. It was an amazingly candid statement regarding our ability to measure the age of the sun. World leading solar astronomer. Katzman reported it in GeoTimes.
Okay.
And this is the quote. There's no evidence, based solely on solar observations, Eddie stated, that the sun is 4.5 to 5 billion years old. I suspect, he said, that the sun is 4.5 billion years old. However, given some new and unexpected results to the contrary, and some time for frantic recalculation and theoretical readjustment, I suspect that we could live with Bishop Ussher's value for the age of the Earth and the sun, which is 6,000 years.
Okay.
I don't think we have much in the way of observational evidence in astronomy to conflict with that.
Oh.
Okay. And he's the expert on that. So why does he believe it? Well, solar physics now looks to paleontology for data on solar chronology.
Really? Huh.
And the people on the paleontology, well, they look to astronomy. And back and forth, back and forth. It's like a bunch of people jumping out of an airplane without parachutes, and they're holding hands with each other, say, I'm not going to fall because I'm holding on to you. Well, and you're not going to fall because you're holding on to him. But they're going to fall. Okay? This is the stuff that the general public doesn't know. And the flip side, something else they don't know, is that there's actually real scientific evidence to support the biblical age of the earth. It's not just Bible versus science. We've seen the supposed science that stands against the biblical timescale doesn't. And we will see that there's genuine scientific evidence that actually supports the biblical timescale of the world. So the last issue we're going to look at for now under this topic is scientific evidence for a young world. The reason that so many Christians fall into denying what the Bible says about the age of the earth is that they believe that there is a plethora of scientific evidence supporting the earth being billions of years old. There really isn't, though. We went through already some of the evidences like radiometric dating and fossils and showed that in fact they do not prove that the earth is billions of years old. Most people who believe it is do so simply because they've heard that and because they think that there's scientific evidence but really haven't looked at it. And the other reason is that the plethora of scientific evidence that the earth is young is simply not brought up. It's not presented in the schools. You actually have to go and dig for it yourself if you want to know the whole story. But there is quite a bit of such evidence.
Great. I look forward to hearing about the evidences for a young world.
All right, let's start with a very simple one, and that's carbon-14.
Okay.
Carbon-14 in the atmosphere of the Earth. Now, here's how that works. You remember when we discussed radiometric dating? The carbon-14 comes about when nitrogen-14 in the atmosphere is bombarded by particles, and it's converted into carbon-14, which is unstable and breaks down.
Okay.
Well, as an engineer, you understand how reaction kinetics works. If you start with no carbon-14 in the atmosphere and the bombardment of the solar particles will begin to build up carbon-14 in the atmosphere, but at the same time, it's also breaking down.
Right.
You get a build up, and it continues until the rate of production and the rate of destruction match. And then you've reached equilibrium.
Right.
And you will get that fixed amount in the atmosphere.
Okay.
Now, scientists have worked out the reaction kinetics for this, and they calculated that it would take 30,000 years for the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in the Earth's atmosphere to reach this equilibrium level, that is where you would get no change after that. It would stay at that level.
Okay.
And that's assuming you start with no carbon-14 initially.
I see.
If you have some carbon-14 initially, of course, then it would be less than 30,000 years to reach equilibrium. And how much less would depend on how much you started with. We talked about that in radiometric dating.
Yeah.
Now, as of 1966, the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in the atmosphere had reached only 75% of equilibrium. That's from Melvin Cook, Prehistory and Earth Models, London, Max Parrish Company, 1966. 75% of equilibrium. It would take 30,000 years to reach complete equilibrium. It would take only 10,000 years to reach 75% of equilibrium. So the amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere is pointing very strongly to the Earth being a maximum, at least the atmosphere of the Earth being a maximum of 10,000 years old.
I see.
Have you heard that before?
I have not heard of this before.
Not surprising.
So why does carbon-14 work here exactly?
Yeah, that's a valid question. I pointed out that in radiometric dating, it doesn't work because you have to make the assumptions. Why does it work here? Well, two reasons. One, the assumption you have to make is, what is the initial amount? Well,
Right.
If the initial amount is 0, that will give you the maximum age of the Earth. So that's a fair assumption to make. And as we said, if you had more, then it would be less than 30,000. So we're not calculating a specific age. We're simply pointing out what's the maximum possible.
Right.
If you pick make the assumption that would give you the oldest possible Earth, what is that? And that's 30,000 years.
I see.
In terms of the other problem with radiometric dating is, how do you know that all of the mother and daughter products were put in and or removed purely by radioactive decay? Again, it's not an issue here because we're talking about equilibrium, which means that all of the sources of production are matched by all of the sources of destruction. So while you can't use carbon-14 to date a specific object, you can use it to see what is the maximum possible age of the atmosphere. And it comes right into the ballpark of the biblical picture, fits it very well, but the biblical view that the Earth is a maximum of 7,686 years old as of the year 2021 fits very well into this. The idea that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old does not fit at all.
Okay. So have people tried to explain away this model before?
You know what? I haven't heard anybody try to explain it away because it's so little known.
Sure.
You've never heard of it before. Now, they do talk about things like, well, maybe a volcano has spewed in more carbon, some form or another, into the atmosphere, and that will have made... But these are local disruptions. They won't affect generally the atmosphere as a whole, because the atmosphere is so huge.
Yeah.
And it would be a short-term effect anyway, before it returns to normal.
Okay.
So that's one line of evidence, scientific evidence showing that the Earth fits into the biblical timescale.
Right. Yeah, so that's one of them. What other evidences do we have?
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but please join us for the next part tomorrow. Same time and same place. If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. We would love to hear from you. Please feel free to share any questions or comments you may have. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, MeWe, and YouTube. Simply search Truth in My Days as one word. Again, Truth in My Days as one word, no spaces in between. And you can connect with us. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.